Hey, what's up, Bronze Agers? It's your host, Bronze Age Nerd, aka Christopher, coming at you with another video. Today I want to talk about something that's kind of important to all of us right now. There's a lot of dishonesty going on in the community, so here's some lies that comic book collectors tell. The first couple ones are going to be a little bit interesting because they're lies we tell ourselves. The first lie I want to go over is, I'm buying this comic book to sell it. We've all been there. We've all seen a comic book in a comic shop or at a place where we know that the price is maybe under FMV. We know what the comic book's worth, and that motivates our decision to buy that comic book. Now, of course, if you find ASM 300 in a dollar bin, buy it all day long, regardless of what you're planning on doing with that book. That'd be a great deal. But, you know, let's say you find a book that you know goes for about $30 and you see it for 10 or 15 bucks and the condition looks right. Well, ask yourself why you're buying that book. Are you buying it because you are going to sell it? Are you buying it just because it's a good deal? Or are you buying it because it's a comic book that you secretly wanted? There's no real wrong answer as long as you stop to ask yourself the question, why am I buying this? Look, there's a lot of flippers, a lot of sellers, a lot of investor dealers, all types of comic collectors out there. And unlike a lot of people, I actually think there's room for each one of those people within the community as long as there's a balance. But no matter how you dice it, if you're buying that comic book, you have to be true to yourself for what your purpose is, because the comic landscape is littered with people who buy a bunch of comics intending to sell them at some point and they never get around to it. So my tip here is to really stop and take a second to think about what your selling strategy is for that comic book. Are you going to list it on eBay? Are you going to sell it on Instagram? Do you know somebody you're going to do a trade with? If you're buying that book just to sell it, then have an exit strategy. How are you actually going to get rid of that comic book down the road? And if you find yourself struggling with the answer, you're like, well, I don't actually ever sell anything on Whatnot or eBay or Instagram or any of those kinds of avenues, then you probably shouldn't buy that comic book. Again, if it's something that brings you joy and that's why you're buying it, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. But a lot of us lie to ourselves when we're buying comic books and we just see a really good deal and we go, I got to have that. So what's the flip side of this scenario? People that buy comic books because they think they want it. So you tell yourself the lie, I'm buying this comic book because I want it. When really, maybe you don't actually want that comic book. Maybe you just want it because everybody else does. That's called FOMO. This is closely related to the first point. I've seen a lot of people buy a comic book because they trick themselves into saying, like, I want this because I know everybody else does. That's a type of FOMO, right? Like that's the idea of, well, I know people find this to be desirable, so I should buy it. I've bought a couple comic books this way. I don't tend to fall into this trap, but I definitely do know people that are guilty of doing this. And it's just as bad as the first problem. If you're buying a comic book and you don't really ask yourself if it's something that matters to you, this kind of goes along with something I did a video a long time ago on collector tips and asking yourself really what you want to collect. Are you just in it for runs? Do you want keys of certain characters? You know, I really recommend writing out a list of books that you're really interested in and that you want to go after hard. And if your book's not on that list, you know, it's okay to add books to that list, but if your book's not on that list, is it really something that you should be investing money in when just because the book's in front of you, you might go look on eBay the next day and see a book you really were interested in? So really stop and ask yourself, is this something that I actually do want? What's my true motivation for buying this comic book? And if you're looking for a really good place to buy those comic books, I recommend DangerousWatersComics.com. At Dangerous Waters Comics and more, you'll find FOC comic books, ratios, exclusives, pre-owned comic books, brand new comic books, trade paperbacks, action figures and statues, all kinds of cool collectibles. They're not one of the big kids on the block. They're actually a new comic book shop that cares about what kind of service that you are going to get, and I really appreciate that. Through the end of September, there's a really awesome deal. You'll be able to get 30% off by using the code BRONZERATIO. That is an amazing deal, and it's something I really recommend taking advantage of if you're looking for some ratio comics, or if you just want to check out some other stuff. Some of those ratios include things like Stray Dogs or Red Room, just some really cool stuff that's out there right now that you're probably going to want to go take a look at. Don't forget, you can live chat with somebody and get answers to questions that you have about the website. You can also request to be notified when an item comes back in stock if you're looking for it. Really cool features that a lot of comic book shops out there don't have. And I want you to remember that Dangerous Waters Comics and More is a place where you can live dangerously. All right, Bronze Age nerds, so you're telling me about these lies I tell myself. What about the lies that all these other collectors tell you? Well, don't worry, we're going to cover that as well. One of my favorite ones I've been hearing a lot of recently is, this is a 9/8 contender. Jesus, I'm tired of hearing that. Now, to be fair, I did an auction last night and I mentioned it a couple times, but I specifically said, hey, I don't say this about every book. If I really believe that it has a chance, I will let you know. Most of the books that people sell as a 9-8 contender aren't. They just aren't. I think when a lot of people say it's a 9-8 contender, what they're really saying is it's a near mint comic book, and near mint's kind of a range. So I wouldn't put too much stock in somebody saying it's a 9-8 contender. We all get 9-8 goggles, kind of like beer goggles. And that's something that I think we really got to watch out for. I think one of the things you got to remember is that most comics, the day they're delivered to a comic shop, let's say it's through Diamond. I know that's kind of changing right now, but let's say it's through Diamond. Most comic books aren't 9-8. That's as soon as it arrives in the comic book store. They're probably not 9-8 when they roll off the line, although there's a higher chance, but the way Diamond packs is just atrocious. And there's a really good chance you can end up with a 9.6 or a 9.4 or even a 9.2, and or even worse. I mean, I've seen Diamond books bent in half, ripped up, all kinds of different things. But you definitely have to be careful with this one. And just people get so caught up on that. If you're looking at a comic book and you assume that you're getting a deal only because it's a 9.8, I'd really pump the brakes and consider what's going on there, because if you're looking at a comic book where anywhere from a 9.2 to a 9.8, it's very valuable and it's in that kind of right vintage, or all high grade copies of it are worth something, that's a lot different story. And that's kind of what I tend to buy if I'm looking at an auction for, a certain book. Some Bronze Age stuff is kind of that way, where it's like, hey, even if it came back a 9.0, I'd still be very happy. So that's something to consider. And again, because some people are going to miss this, if you have good enough pictures, it is totally possible to tell if you're looking at a 9.8, and you don't want to bank too much on it. You don't want to put too much of an investment behind that unless you're very sure of what you're looking at. All right, get your hype men ready, because next we're going to talk about hype books. Books that get hyped up because they're on lists, or because they're spec news, or some kind of casting or option rumor or whatever. Be super careful with these books. The kind of, the lie here is this is the next big book. This is a book you have to own. This is a book you have to go seek out. And I would be extraordinarily careful with this advice. I follow a great channel, JP's Budget Collecting, who looks at the top 10 list 6 months later and decides, hey, was that a good investment or not? Was it trash or not? Was it straight cash or not? It's a really fun channel. I enjoy watching it, and that show in particular. But if you're watching along with those and you follow those trends, you'll see, I'd say about a third of those comic books ever are either holding value or increase in value that end up on those hot lists from the big players in that particular game. So you really have to be critical when it comes to spec. Honestly, with some patience and some intuition and a good enough bankroll, it's actually fairly easy to spec on books. I mean, over the last few years, you could have made a lot of money if you were willing to go hard on certain books that were definitely coming to the MCU. Like, you could have been buying up copies of Eternals. You could have been buying up copies of the first appearances of the Marvel Zombies. You could have been buying up all these books that are hitting right now. The pathway was there. It was just how much were you willing to invest in it? It's definitely a trend that's going to continue, at least for the time being. We still know about MCU projects that are coming out. Like, we know you can still go after Black Knight. You can still go after Fantastic Four books. Yeah, they seem astronomical now, but they're only going to go up as we get closer to the release dates of those films. And that's the thing, is there is smart spec to be had. We still know the X-Men are coming. It's a safe bet that even some of the cheaper X-Men characters to buy into are going to eventually appear on screen. And even if they're not, as the X-Men get announced in the MCU, those books are going to climb too, because people are going to assume that they're going to appear on screen. So even if you don't want to wait for the full appearance in the MCU to sell those books, you could still sell off as soon as we get trailers for like an X-Men movie or something, and still probably see a return on your investment. It's not hard to spec smart. The older of the book you go to, I think the easier path of success you're going to have, though. And that's something that's worth remembering. All right, well, here's one I didn't think I'd have to add to the list, but recent events have proved me wrong. How about this lie? It's a first print. Okay, some assholes on eBay and other places have been selling facsimiles, true believers, reprints as first prints. And basically, all I can say about this is those sellers are assholes. They're taking advantage of people. It's not right. I hope that the buyers that do end up with those books can get restitution for that. At the flip side, I would have to say that Publishers like Marvel should try to differentiate the covers in a more outstanding way than they did like with Ultimate Fallout 4, for example. But it's not necessarily all on Marvel. I mean, there are collectors that want very close to identical reproductions of the book for, you know, say a signing event or something like that, when the original book's just out of their reach. There should be some kind of differentiation, like maybe a color differentiation in the font or something that makes it a little bit easier to spot than just slightly moving the barcode and changing the color of the label from white to red for the tiny little Marvel print near the top. And also the buyers need to do their research. If a deal looks too good to be true, then it's probably too good to be true. And also you need to investigate, hey, are there different versions of this comic book that I might be getting scammed with? That's unfortunate, but at the same time, if you're making an expensive purchase with a comic book, you should probably know what you're getting into anyway. And it's just an unfortunate situation that I'm sorry we have to deal with, but you do need to be on your guard. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I'd really like to hear your take on some of these lies. I definitely have more of these I could do if this proves to be popular, because there's plenty of lies out there, unfortunately, both ones that are in the community and ones that we tell ourselves. So let me know what you thought, and I hope you guys are having a great week. I'll catch you on the next video. Until then, I want you to remember, as always, hey, 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 hey. Read comics every day.